We start here this morning. One of the late Senzo Meyiwa's closest friends, Tumelo Madlala, will continue testifying in the High Court in Pretoria today. Proceedings were adjourned yesterday when the witness became emotional as he told the court of events that led up to the shooting of the former Bafana and Orlando Pirates goalkeeper. Madlala was among the people in the home in Vosloorus when Meyiwa was killed in 2014. He testified that the two men that entered the house and demanded cell phones and money. Madlala is the state's third witness in the trial in which 5 men are accused of Meyiwa's murder. Standing by outside the court in Pretoria is Chriselda Lewis to give us the latest. So Chriselda, a very good morning to you. So an emotionally charged morning yesterday as Tumelo Madlala had his first day on the stand, and subsequently, court had to adjourn. What can we expect to come out of his testimony today as it continues?
Well, Mxolisi, good morning. It was towards after lunch when we saw Tumelo Madlala tell this court about what took place on the day that Senzo Meyiwa was killed. As you correctly point out, detailing how 2 men had entered the house. One entered first, described as having dreadlocks and wearing a hat, how he demanded money and cell phones, as you correctly point out, to a point where he was able to get up from the couch where he was sitting and ran towards the kitchen area, and that's where he saw Senzo Meyiwa pinning a second man against the wall. And he ran then to the kitchen, to the bedroom. And when he got to the bedroom, after some time, he had heard the voices of some of the occupants inside the house, and one of the other people that was also inside the house, Mtogo, managed to open the door for him using a spoon because he says he was not able to open it from inside. And he describes how he came out of that bedroom and found Senzo Meyiwa lying on the floor, and that was in the dining room between the couch and the TV stand. But it was at the time that when he stood up from the couch before going into the bedroom, when he tried to run, he says, towards the kitchen door, because that would have been closest to him, when he says after he had noticed Senzo Meyiwa pinning the second man against the wall, he says after that he heard a gun shot go off, and he says his ears became a bit deaf, and that was when he had then run towards the bedroom area where he says he hid his cell phone, he had found some clothes on top of the bed, and then he was able to do so. So what we're getting is now a sense of possibly what could have happened on the night that Senzo Meyiwa was killed. Many could argue that perhaps while the testimony that came way before that of the police officers who had responded to the scene, the questions that everyone has been asking since 2014 is exactly what happened on the day that Senzo Meyiwa was killed. So now we're getting a true sense, or a sense in this instance, of what may have transpired on that day. We're expecting Tumelo Madlala to continue his testimony here inside court, not forgetting that the media is not allowed to show his face, so you will be able to hear his voice. And indeed, about 15 minutes before court was due to adjourn yesterday, Tumelo Madlala became very emotional, detailing what happened on that day. According to his version of events, he's expected to continue from that point on in terms of, what happened after. Was Senzo Meyiwa taken into the car, into the hospital? We're expecting a lot of questions also to be raised during cross-examination by the defense about the events of after the shooting. What exactly happened? What was the next move by the occupants inside the house to try and save Senzo Meyiwa's life? And then at what point did the 2 men, which we know are 2 at this particular point, what happened then? Did they run out of the house? Remember, previous testimony, including by Sergeant Tetwa, he basically said that when he had arrived at the scene, he met Uncle Temba, who was believed to be an uncle to Kelly Khumalo. And when he got there, Temba was not able to indicate what exactly had happened. He just said that someone had been shot and was taken to the hospital. And police said when they left the scene, there were neighbors standing outside Kelly Khumalo's mother's home, and the neighbors there said there were people who ran towards the park, which is not too far from Kelly Khumalo's home. So we will perhaps hear from Tumelo Madlala at what point the two men inside the house left the home. What did they do to try and save Senzo Meyiwa's life? At what point did they take him to the hospital? Why did they not call an ambulance? Those are certainly questions that will be raised also in cross-examination.
Interestingly, Chriselda, as we're having this conversation, central to all of this as well is a family that expects justice. And I know that we saw some members of the Meyiwa family making their way to the courtroom yesterday. Talk to us about how their reaction was as Tumelo took to the stand and as Tumelo, was giving his accounts of Senzo Meyiwa's last moments.
Look, when they arrived at court yesterday, they were truly optimistic that, the case would continue. You would recall the day before, there had been a postponement in the matter as the witness that was due to testify, which we understood would be one of the neighbors, could not come to court to testify. And Madlala could not find a flight, according to what the state prosecutor had told us inside court day before yesterday. So when he arrived at court yesterday, certainly there was a sense from the Meyiwa family that now was the time they would get an understanding so many years later about what possibly happened to their loved one on that fateful day. And you could clearly see, a sense of anticipation. They didn't know what to expect. What would they hear? But all they're calling for is justice. They want to know the truth of what happened on that day, and they're hoping that those that were inside the house on the day that Senzo Meyiwa was killed will do exactly that in this court. They say that will mean justice for them. As they left the court yesterday, they were visibly traumatized, and the expressions on their faces certainly could tell all that, obviously what they heard inside court would not sit well with them as the bereaved family. So that is certainly the sense that we got. And it's going to be certainly very difficult, Mxolisi, for them to sit in this court and listen to details of what happened when Senzo Meyiwa was killed, because it will paint a picture of his last moments.
Now, as we arch closer to the proceedings getting underway for this day, how long are we expecting Madlala to be on the stand?
Well, Mxolisi, from what we last heard from the court is that these proceedings will sit until Friday, and then the matter will adjourn or stand down, and then we're possibly going to return in November again. But we're likely to get a definite, direction from the court perhaps on Friday. But that was the initial standpoint of the court. So we're expecting him to be on the stand perhaps possibly for the next 2 days, because he still has to continue his testimony before cross-examination begins, and then there will be re-examination. So you will have T.T. Tobane, who represents accused number 1 to 4, will cross-examine him. Advocate Zandile Mshololo for accused number 5 will then follow, and then re-examination by the state prosecutor, Advocate George Baloy. So that is likely to take time, and in particular because the defense would want to be thorough. This is the first witness to take the stand since Meyiwa was killed that is detailing possibly what could have happened on that day. So every crucial point about what happened when these men entered the house, what did they do, at what point did they try to help Senzo Meyiwa, when did they move him towards the car? Because we know now from the two police officers that had taken the stand, the forensic detective Sergeant Thabo Masia, as well as Sergeant Mtetwa, who were amongst the first police officers to arrive at the scene, that Senzo Meyiwa was taken to the nearby hospital. So those questions are bound to be raised about what did they do to try and save his life. Again, why did they not call an ambulance? If they did, we will certainly hear inside this court. Advocate Zandile Mshololo walking into the court at this particular moment. She's not in our shot at the moment. We don't have to take visuals of her. We'll start proceedings, Mxolisi, when they begin at 10 o'clock. But I guess she's also well prepared. But of course, perhaps until Friday, because as I indicated, he'll continue his testimony this morning, and then you will have cross-examination by Titi Tabane, and then cross-examination by Advocate Zandile Mshorolo before you have re-examination again. So I would estimate until Friday.
So, Chriselda, I need to pick up on a point that you've just made now, and that's on the possible postponement until November. I remember sometime last week there were concerns that were raised by Judge Maumera, who said this was now, a case that was being dedicated to side shows, and subsequently we saw how the judge had to call in the various counsel to the chambers in order for them to have a meeting about what he called not wasting time. What does this mean right now, looking at this possibility of a postponement until November, and who's likely to be next to take the stand?
Look, Mxolisi, I think it'll be very difficult for me to opine on that part, precisely because I think the court will give a clear direction in terms of how we move forward. That had been the initial plan. That was what we understood was going to take place. But the court will certainly be able to give direction on Friday in terms of when and how we will proceed. Very difficult to say after Tumelo Madlala who the next witness will be. But I might get a sense that perhaps it could be someone who was also inside the house at the time that Senzo Meyiwa was killed. Because obviously you would want to create a chain of possibilities of what may have happened on that particular day, but it's very difficult to say at this particular point. It is based on a number of issues, on whether the witness is ready to come to this court to testify, whether there might be certain obstacles that might stand in the way of a particular person not being able to pitch on that particular day. It's very, very difficult to say. We're really relying on the morning of, when an actual witness is going to take the stand for us to see who that person is going to be. And precisely because one of the critical aspects that have been raised by a number of the legal counsel in this matter is the issue of the protection of witnesses and also threats and intimidation, which we've heard about since the start of this trial, or even before the start of this trial. So I think everyone is really threading carefully to ensure that the safety, of course, of these witnesses is protected, and that they feel that they can come to this court and give their version of events. But in terms of how we proceed post-Friday, I really cannot say at this particular point. We'll really be led by the court on Friday, but I would only imagine that Tumelo Madlala will continue until then, because we still have to go through cross-examination as well as re-examination.
All right, Chriselda Lewis, thank you ever so much for that insightful report on the Senzo Meyiwa murder case that is currently underway in Pretoria. And of course, we will be touching base with you as when the proceedings get underway.